Esther chapter 5. All right, we've met all the characters from Haman and Mordecai to Ahasuerus and Esther, and the story is kind of to its pinnacle now. The plan has been revealed, has been made known to Esther, and Mordecai has pushed for her to go and tell the king. And some of the great words of both Mordecai and Esther, the warning that if she did not speak up, even though she's part of the palace, she would not escape, but that another deliverer would be raised up for the people as a whole. And her response, I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. She's going to do what it takes to deliver the message, to intervene and be the deliverer for her people, in spite of the fact that the court rules are against that if she was to just walk in and unannounced, it could very well cost her life. But Mordecai's words are, you're gonna die one way or the other. You're not. If you go in and the king doesn't hear you and you die. If you don't go in, the king still won't hear you, but you will still die. So her life was probably at an end anyways, unless the king will receive her. But if I perish, I perish. I was thinking today, because we're getting so close to Christmas, I start thinking about Christmas messages and sermons and all of that, and I don't know why this would come to my mind thinking about Esther this afternoon and this statement that she made, but for Mary to be standing in front of Gabriel and just say, let it, just let it be. Whatever's to be, let it be done to your maidservant. And it's kind of, you see Esther's apprehension to the whole thing, and her rebuke, or not rebuke, but her resistance wasn't because she didn't want to save her people, but it's a dangerous thing. But yet she gives over to it, and Mary does the same thing. She gives over to the dishonor that would come from being pregnant during a betrothal and not the actual time of marriage, and that it wouldn't be Joseph's baby, but she just accepts. I could lose everything, but whatever the Lord wants, that's what's going to happen. And hey, it's the kind of day and time that we could be living in at any moment. And people around the world, even in our own country, do live it. But it could be personally required of us to make these kind of decisions and have this kind of attitude as to whatever the Lord wants, even if it costs me everything, even if it costs me my life. So I think we have some hints here that there was faith, obviously, in the Lord by Esther and Mordecai, just from some of the things and reactions. The talk of a deliverer, the talk of, or the command to fast for 3 days, and me and my maidservants and I will do likewise. It doesn't say fast and pray, but I think people just make too much out of that. I think it was kind of insinuated in the law that if you're fasting, you're praying. You're fasting for a reason. You're listening for God's voice in your life. It was not just something they just did as a religious ritual. Especially her being in a Gentile palace, she wouldn't just refuse her food without the king knowing about it. Maybe one day, maybe she's sick one day, but by day 3, if you're not eating on a regular basis, then the king's going to know. And at this point, she's still hiding who she is as far as being a Jew. So I don't think it's too hard to see God's hand in all of this and the timing of everything, especially with what we'll look at tonight with the interaction between Haman and Mordecai, and then Haman and Esther, and how everything plays out. Um, and the Jews look at this story, and it is, besides the Torah, one of the most read books in the Jewish culture. This is a big story to them. This is a big deal to them, the remembrance of Esther. And so, anyhow, let's just pick up here. Chapter 5, verse 1 says, "Now it happened on the third day that Esther put her royal robes on, or put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in her hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter, and the king said to her, 'What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom.'" And so Esther obviously has a great working knowledge of being in the king's court. We already know she knows it's illegal to go unless you're sent for. You don't just go to the king. Her approach is not out of control. It's not looking like desperation. She goes in very diplomatically. She stands in the court. She still is evidently in a place of danger just standing in the court. But she stands there. She doesn't just proceed to walk closer to the throne. She's just standing there where he can see her in sight. And this is a place, I think, from what we're going to see later on in the story, a place where the diplomats would come. The princes would be there. The other directors would be there. Haman will be there at one point after the king reads the Chronicles or has them read to him, and he asks who's here that can help advise me on how to reward this guy. And Haman is already there, and Haman's in the court. And so they go out, they get him, and they bring him into the king. Probably the same area, but it was an area where men would go, and when men would gather, and women now would not just walk into there. And so the queen being there, though, would cause a great stir. And this is something that I learned just today. You didn't just approach the queen, even. If you just approached the queen, within 7 paces of the queen, you were dead. So keep that in mind when we look later on in the next couple of chapters, when Haman's throwing himself on her couch where she's sitting. He's too close. And so he's a doomed man before the plot is all the way revealed even. As soon as he does that, he's done. So imagine her walking into the court. The king's going to know because everybody's going to back up. She's going to be fully revealed to the king because nobody's going to be so close that she's going to not be seen by the king. So he holds out the scepter. She goes up. She touches the scepter. She doesn't just walk in and start talking. She addresses him with and gives him honor and all of that, to the point where he returns the protocol with, what is your request? It shall be given you up to half the kingdom. That was an exaggerated whatever you want. Anything you want, like he's just forgotten about her. Maybe they're making a lot of war plans. She hasn't been there in 30 days and just been so sidetracked by business. He sees her there, and because we know that he had a great, his heart was for her, and he loved her. But the business of the king has kept him from interacting with her all this time. And I think it's evident of that, his fondness for her, just in that he put the scepter out. This is a man that had a reputation for extreme anger in a quick minute. Just if he got hot right now. And for her to be where she shouldn't be, Vashti wouldn't come where he wanted her. She wouldn't do what he wanted her to do that's it. You're done. You're out of here. You know, super fired up. And so, but Esther goes where she's not supposed to be because she hasn't been called, and yet because she does it with honor and she does it with dignity, he responds greatly to her, and it's not a sidetrack from, I think, probably his actual feelings for her. Verse 5 says, then the king said, bring Haman, or I'm sorry, verse 4. So Esther answered, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom, it shall be done. Then Esther answered and said, my petition and request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I have prepared for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. Right, so it's been suggested that maybe the king acted so quickly she wasn't ready, because it seems like she's putting this off a little more. On the surface, if we just stay right here, it's kind of, although she asked for him to come today. She asked for him to come that day to the banquet that she had prepared. But again, the king seems to be in quite a big rush. Let's do it right now. Let's not we'll be there in a couple of hours. Let us get this meeting over with. Let's do this. Or what time, when do you want us to come? When is the banquet ready? Get Haman, let's go right now. So this is a man who's neglected, home a little bit. Gives him a reprieve from all those who were trying to butter him up. And not a big surprise. You want to have, there's no doubt guards standing outside the door. Any place he goes, he doesn't go actually alone. But not a big surprise that you invite one of the dignitaries. And Haman's basically second in command in the kingdom anyways. So he's not surprised that she wants Haman to come. It would be kind of a protocol thing anyways. And to have him come and say, be more diplomatic again. Come and if you can, come and come to the banquet again that I prepared for you guys tomorrow, and I will do as the king has said. So she's going to make it known. This is again not just a diplomatic thing, but it shows wisdom. He can see now, probably in her, sense in her. She wants to ask something, but she wants to ask it the right way. She wants to ask for the right thing. Now, we know the story already. This is not just a delay by Esther. This is the delay by God. Because there's some things that need to happen to set this all up. So between this banquet on this day and the banquet on the next day, so much is going to happen. So when you hear people say, well, it looks like Ezekiel 38 and 39 are certainly on the horizon, but there's so much that has to happen between now and then. It's probably not going to be that quick, not as quick as everybody's hoping, or not as quick as everybody thinks it could be. Listen, things happen in a day all the time now. It's a normal thing. And in the middle of all the diplomatic stuff and all that, armies are moving in and to the north of Israel, and everything's being set up over there. And about the time you forget about earthquakes and fires, all of a sudden another earthquake happens in Alaska's, turning into a sinkhole. It's all over the place. And that was quite a shake they got up there. I didn't realize. I thought that kind of earthquake was normal for Alaska. And maybe it is in parts of Alaska, but this thing took out a highway where they're worried about supply routes getting into some of the villages and stuff through the winter. So it wasn't just the normal run-of-the-mill earthquake. And then everybody starts bringing up, well, Alaska is on the Ring of Fire around the Pacific, and that's all very active now. And Was there? Atlanta, yeah, wow. Well, and then there was one. There's a that guy I told you guys watch on YouTube that does the predictions of where they're going to be. He was predicting one. I want to say not too far from Madagascar, because something happened on the other side of the ocean from there, and he said it's going to come through the. And I can't remember the name of the island now, but it's in that area, and people were making fun of him. Huh? Yeah, and people were making fun of him because he's like, you're scaring the people. This island, nothing's really happened in a while. Well, now they're talking about a whole nother island coming up right beside that one, or that whole island could be a bigger island, because the earthquakes happen, the volcanoes are becoming active underneath the water, and he said, I told him it was going to happen. So, and this guy, it's not like this is a Christian guy that I'm listening to. He doesn't claim to be a Christian. None of that. He just knows how to track the earthquakes and the movements. When something happens here, he's kind of got the fault lines all traced out, and there's pressure here and it's given here. It's going to happen over here next. And he's predicting them, almost at the level that they're going to happen at, too. So, anyhow, he goes through all the history. His program goes through all the history and everything. And actually, the whoever it is, the geologist or whoever it is that tracks that stuff, are actually starting to pay attention to him now, and that. But anyhow, all of that happening, God's in control. Even in this situation, when it looks like maybe she chickened out, or maybe she didn't just, this is a pause by God. This isn't just a pause by a nervous woman. This is a pause by God, so that all this other stuff in one day that can happen, that can really just rock the boat and set up the perfect moment here, is going to happen. So, verse 9. So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. And that statement, he did not stand, you want to remember that for in just a moment here. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come with the king to the banquet that she prepared. And tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. So this guy's a super huge egomaniac. You call your friends and your wife in just so you can remind them how great you are. Look at all I have. Look at all the kids I have. I got 10 sons or whatever it is, and it's just the insanity of it. But then verse 13 just is the cherry on the top. It says, yet all this avails me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. I can't enjoy any of this as long as that one guy is just sitting there and won't stand up for me, won't pay me any respect. It's pretty crazy. So verse 14, his wife has a great idea. Verse 14 says, then his wife, Zeresh, and all of his friends said to him, let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet, and the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. So these gallows are like 50 feet high. More than 50 feet, it's 50 cubits, 75 feet high. So now they didn't just tie a rope at the top and hang you from it. They impaled you is what they did. This was kind of the beginnings of crucifixion. The Persians started this, and by the time you get down to the Romans, they've perfected it into a great torturous thing. So this is the intention is an impalement 75 feet high of Mordecai. And so they give him this great idea, and he decides, hey, this is awesome. Now I can sleep tonight, and I'll go to bed early, and I'll be to work early, and I'll get in there with the king, and we'll talk about this, and I'm sure he'll give me anything he wants. He gave me his signet ring to do business for him. I can do anything. So, verse 1 of 6 says, that night the king could not sleep. So Haman can go to sleep because he's got a plan. It's in the bag. If he's losing sleep, it's because he's excited about he's finally got a plan to take care of this Mordecai. But the king can't go to sleep. Again, this is not because he drank too much coffee. This isn't because he was eating, a lot of sugar before he went to bed or anything else. This is God keeping him awake. So one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And so I'm tired. I can't get to sleep. I want to read something, boring. I want to read the goings on of the kingdom, the history, the short list here. Maybe if they read me this stuff, I can finally go to sleep. It'll bore me to death, bore me to sleep. So verse 2 says, and when it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtha and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers, who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. That's a big deal, by the way. And all of this that Haman is going to suggest be done because he doesn't know that's Mordecai the king's talking about. There was great honor given to somebody who had shown loyalty by a king. There was a lot of reward given because that would make people want to be loyal. And now here's Mordecai. Nothing's been done for him. He saved the king's life. Nothing's been done. And so now the king's got to do something. He remembers, let's do something about this. All right, so verse 4 says, so the king said, who in the court, or who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. Then the king's servant said to him, Haman is here, or Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? Who else? Who else but me? Right? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. So even the king's horse had a type of crown on its head with the crest on it. And obviously everybody's going to know the king's robe, and everybody's going to, this is going to be a huge honor. It says, then let the robe and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor, then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So he's got it all worked out. Not only does the king want to honor me, but I'm going to remind all these other guys that they're lower than me by let's get the most noble, the next in line, to take that horse's rein, to put the crown and put the robe on me, to put me on the horse, to parade me through the town and say, this is how the king honors a man who's honorable. There's nothing honorable about thinking this way of yourself. It's just not. But it is funny because it does it. The king is kind of, quick on the draw, isn't he? Esther says, hey, come to a banquet today, you and Haman, that I prepared for you. Let's go right now. So Haman says, hey, let's put the guy on the horse. Let's parade him through town. Verse 10, then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse, as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. In the king's mind, you are a great advisor. This is amazing. Let's do this for Mordecai. And you're going to have the honor of leading him around and making the proclamation and putting the robe on him. This is rubbing salt and dirt in an open wound. This is just, and the king doesn't have any idea. He showed up there to say, hey, let me take that guy in your gate and throw him on top of this pole 75 feet in the air and make an example out of him. And instead, he's going to take him. Well, let's look. So, verse 11, so Haman took the robe and the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horseback through the city square, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done to the man who delights in the king. Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. All right, so now he's got to go to the gate, and here's Mordecai sitting, and still sitting. Think about it. He's going to walk into the gate with the robe, with the horse. Everybody's going to stand up because it's Haman, except Mordecai. And he's going to walk up to Mordecai, and he's going to say, stand up, I need to put this on you. Now he's going to stand up, not because he's honoring Haman, but God has orchestrated this for Mordecai, the one who really is righteous, to be honored even by the one who is not, whether they want him to or whether he wants to or not. The man he hates most, the man who makes him a miserable man in spite of the fact that he has everything except for the king's throne. He is above everyone else. He has all the king's favor, except for, being not above the queen, but everybody else. And now he's got to go and take Mordecai and do this. The man he hates the most. So afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with his head covered. So he's been shamed. He feels shame for having to do this. This is no great honor to the king. This was no great honor to him to go and reward a man who has saved the king. It's none of that. So he can cover his head. And Mordecai is got to be going, what just happened? What was this all about? And maybe it was explained to me, but still. Imagine the embarrassment. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't held a grudge against the king because he wasn't rewarded. He did his duty to preserve the king and to honor the king, and made the plan known. And he went back to work. And now he's been honored above anything he could have asked for. He might not. And so he gets done with all of this show, and he goes back to work. He goes back to the gate. But not Haman. Haman has been shamed and runs home. I'm going home. I can't. My day is done already. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. So in a day's time, he's gone home angry, built a gallows at the advice of his wife and friends to put Mordecai on, has a plan to go and ask for Mordecai to be killed. The king, on the other hand, can't sleep, reads the Chronicles, finds out about Mordecai, so they're both thinking about the same guy. One's dreaming about seeing him on a pole. The other one is dreaming about putting him, honor him. How am I going to honor him? Or not dreaming, I guess, thinking about it. And Haman goes to carry out his plan, and instead he carries out the plan of God. And I'm telling you, it is something to sit and listen to people who don't know Jesus at all say things that only the Holy Spirit could put in their mouth. It's it's an amazing thing to just sit and watch. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. It's almost like you're in a dream. You know, that meeting that Tracy and I had in Lansing, that that whole ordeal, and we just sat there and everybody was. You had the Hamans on this side, and you had the kings on this side, and the kings just said, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do," and you're going, you know, you maybe could have saved me a couple of bucks in gas to coming up here. You just called me and told me you're going to do it to begin with. I don't know, but it was amazing to just sit there and watch all that. So anyhow, Mordecai is just shaking his head. I'm sure. What in the world just happened? Haman is shaking his head for sure and hanging it, and my life is over. Verse 13 says, Haman told his wife Zeresh and all of his friends everything that had happened to him. His wise men and his wife Zeresh. I don't know why they keep saying her name so much, but anyways, Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him." Wow. Prophecy. Exactly. Tell me this book is not from God. And that's coming from your wife. It's almost like they didn't realize he was Jewish until just this moment. I think he said when he went in, Mordecai, did he just say Mordecai or Mordecai the Jew? They knew he was Jewish. But why all of a sudden this change in their heart then? You've begun to fall and he's Jewish, you're not going to stand. Maybe they've heard some of the goings on with Zerubbabel and Joshua, and some of the goings on with Ezra, because we're kind of in that Ezra Nehemiah time slot there a little bit. Some of the things that are happening, and now all of a sudden this realization, or maybe it's just a word of prophecy that God has put in her mouth, just like he did Annas the high priest. Better for one man to die for the nation. And was John, I think it's in John when that records it. I'm not sure now. I'd have to go look. But anyways, whoever recorded it said that he had prophesied. It was a word of prophecy that he gave, and he didn't know it. And, she's just speaking what needs to be spoken. You wonder who wrote this book. Right, she probably did, but who has access to this? Because Haman doesn't get to tell this story. How does the writer of this book know the goings on inside of his house? Crazy. Holy Spirit, right. I mean, you guys give me the obvious answer. Exactly. I understand. What's that? The Berg? Bird? Oh. There you go. There you go. So, for the recording, Ecclesiastes 10, verse 20 says, do not curse the king even in your thoughts. Do not curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. So, I guess you don't know who's listening or who's going to reveal it. But certainly, like you guys said, the Holy Spirit has revealed this to whoever's writing. it'd just be interesting to find out how he found out, how the Holy Spirit revealed it to him. But anyways, all the things that you can just think about and ponder, and if I do that, we won't even get through verse 14. So anyways, verse 14 says, while they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. So now maybe he's thinking, all right, well, the day's been a bust so far, but at least I can go see the queen, and maybe now, I don't know, who knows what's going through his head, if he's intending to ask again, or what the deal is. I mean, you got to think that maybe he doesn't think he can ask now. How do you take a guy, you advise the king how to honor him, you carried it out for the king, you can't come back the next day and say, oh, by the way, now I want to take the guy and throw him up on top of this gallows. What do you do now? And you've already set up all of his people to be destroyed. But, different plan. Verse 1 says, so the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine. The king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom. It shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So again, great words, great way of putting it. We've been sold, the people. Now Haman offered to pay for all of this whole a day when they were going to annihilate the Jews and get rid of them as a people all throughout the whole kingdom. He was willing to pay it. And she said, we've been sold. We've been sold for a night. We've been marked for destruction. And she puts herself in there, for me and my people to be destroyed. Now you know already, she's got the king's ear. One message came for his life through her and Mordecai. Now there's this other message coming through saying, now I've been marked for destruction, me and my people. And you wonder where Haman is right now. Is he thinking about Mordecai? Is he consumed about Mordecai and what happened earlier in the day? Is he really listening to what the queen has said? Or is now she has his attention? She will have his attention if she doesn't right at this moment. But I just like that, if we've been held for or sold for slaves and that, I wouldn't have said anything. Although you couldn't have been compensated for your loss. We're already we're protecting the throne. Mordecai sits in the gate, and my people are great throughout the nation. Of course, he doesn't know she's Jewish yet. He knew Mordecai was a Jew, but he doesn't know that she is yet until just now. So King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? You got to wonder if he's picking up the pieces here a little bit, because Haman's already asked for this to happen to a certain people. And the king has said, yeah, go ahead. So, and Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. All right, so whatever the king was doing outside, he was arranging Haman's demise, probably, or at least trying to gather it in. So when the king had returned, or when the king returned from the palace garden to to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, "Will he also assault the queen while I am in the house?" As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And that's not the words covered Haman's face. The servants came in and covered Haman's face. He is marked for death. He crossed that line I was talking about before. He's too close to the queen. So he's already toast. He just sealed his fate right there. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, "Look, the gallows, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman." Then the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. Now, think about that verse that we read that Ron pointed out in Ecclesiastes. The eunuchs are in and out of that gate. They're hearing what's going on. Haman hasn't hidden from too many people what's going on, and he's let his wise men in on it. So now you've got multiple people who know his plan. There's plenty of opportunity for it to come back to the gate, because when you know something like that, if you can use it against the guy later on down the road, you hold that like it's some kind of treasure. And so when all of this plays out, if the king doesn't like how it played out, all of a sudden you've got the enemy. You get to take his place now. This is all a big ruse. Everybody is kind of trying to get their position and get their leverage set so they can move everything. And the reality of it is, it's God who's moving it. It is, yeah, exactly. It's politics. You're seeing the life of politics, just like today, right? So on that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. So everything Haman had is now Mordecai's. Everything. I'm pretty sure he probably moved his wife out, but everything. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears, and to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people, or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews, as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke." All right, so the order that Haman wrote can't really be revoked. And that's really not what she's asking for. She's asking to be able to counteract it. So now Mordecai has the same position as Haman. He has the same authority as Haman. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia. 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by courier on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. In one day, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor, and in every province and city, everywhere in the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, because fear of the Jews fell upon them. Isn't that crazy? That's amazing. Not only are they not going to bother the Jews, but we're going to be Jews. We're going to convert. And we know, it doesn't say so here, but we know that to be Jewish meant you learned the law. Conversion wasn't just, all right, I'm just going to be a Jew by name. Now you have the law to learn, you have the prophets to learn, you have all of that. And instead of annihilating them, they became a bigger force within the Persian territory. So we'll stop there. We'll finish up next week. But amazing story. This is not the first time I've taught through Esther or taught little kids this thing. And 2 years ago, I think we did Purim here on Sunday with the little kids and had them all up here doing their thing. And that's what they do. They read through this story. It's the feast and the holiday that they were talking about. And, when they read the story, the people all cheer for Mordecai and they all boo and hiss at Haman, and which gets kind of comical when you get to those verses where then Haman did and then Mordecai did, and you have their names back and forth for a number of verses, and then you go for a number without, and then you have them back again, and it was fun to do with the kids. The first time I taught kids that are about Emma's age, and I think Hannah was in the class at that time, and so to teach them all of that, and they knew all the names, and I could go in every Sunday and say, all right, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, and they'd list them all out, and then when I would start to read, they'd do the boo and the hiss, and the other classes could hear them, but it was fun, and so anyhow, it's kind of a shock if you research it now. It's pretty much a drunken festival. They wear masks and everything. They do the whole deal, but it's not good, really. It's really not. So it's a shame that it's turned into that for some. I hesitate to say for most because I don't really know, but I saw videos of buildings where the area was this big and they would sit in seats, but it was all kinds of drinking and yelling and carrying on, and it's turned into something that it probably was never intended to be. But I understand. Great celebration. God delivered them. I wish I paid more attention to the acoustics acrostics. I mean, when it's, they have a phrase that the first letter of each word will spell out Jehovah or Yahweh. When a Jew says it, it's forwards. When a Gentile is speaking says the phrase that spells out his name, it spells it out backwards. And there's another one that it's always Yahweh, either forward or backward. And there's another one I think that goes up and down, but it's not Yahweh. It's a different name for God. Honestly, I don't think it's Jehovah though. I think Yahweh and Jehovah are the same thing. It's I can't remember. Anyhow, but the ancient Jewish scribes, when they would get to those phrases, would capitalize those letters in the phrase that would spell out Yahweh. So it's not something that somebody just found. It's actually there. They've known it for a long time. Just in their mind, it puts his name on this book without being in the story. It still puts his name on the book and shows his providence and his deliverance. And, it is what it is. I've never had a doubt about it or that it should be in the Bible or not. There's been a lot of debate because of the lack of his name, whether it should be there or not. But it's one of the great stories that shows his providence in spite of the people who are involved. So not because of the people, well, partly because of the people who are involved, but in spite of them too. So one that we should take a lot of encouragement from, to know that we haven't been forgotten. God knows right where we're at, knows our circumstances, and is at work in our life. And we need to remember that. So anyhow, let's pray. Father, thank you for your word, for this story, this amazing story of your deliverance. Lord, how you orchestrated every detail of that story, just to work everything out, from a delay for a day, everything that happens within a day. And Lord, because of that, we can look at what goes on around us, and we can see how things are shaping up in this world, and know that we are on the verge of seeing you and hearing from you and being called out. Lord, that we know that there are some major prophecies concerning Israel that are about to be fulfilled, or in the process of being fulfilled in our lifetime. And as desperate as things may seem sometimes, you are still in control. You are orchestrating everything. There is no conspiracy, behind the scenes action, or anything that you don't know about, that you aren't actually the one in control of, regardless of whether they recognize you or not. And we thank you for that, Lord. That we get to serve you, Almighty God, who is never surprised by anyone or anything, who is greater than all of our circumstances, and who loves his people and his church so much. And Lord, I pray that we would remember these stories that we have read through in these history books, and remember that you are watching over us, that you love us with the same love you have for Esther and David and Josiah and the rest. And Lord, that one day we will be with you, and I pray that that would keep us looking forward every day. In Jesus' name, amen.